I want to start today with something I've been sitting with for a little while. In all the years I've been doing this work, sitting with young people and their families, walking into schools, being in the rooms where real conversations happen, there's one thing that comes up more than any technique, any model, any framework, and it's this. People heal when they feel safe enough to be honest. When they feel safe enough to be honest, where someone has shown them consistently and over time that they're not going anywhere. At The Resilient Kid, we talk a lot about two things that sit at the absolute core of everything that we do. The first is this: we meet young people where they're at, not where we need them to be, not where the curriculum says, or where their parents are hoping they'll get to, but where they actually are. Right now, in this moment, we start there. The second is what we call the 360 wrap, because a young person does not exist in isolation. They exist within the family dynamics, within the schoolyard, within a community. And if we're only working with one part of that picture, we're only ever getting part of the way there. Real change, lasting change, happens when everyone around that young person is working together, when the same language is being spoken at home and in the therapy room and in the classroom. So nobody is pulling in a different direction. But today I want to talk about something that sits underneath all of that, something that has to come before the 360 can work. Before the family sessions, before the school liaison, before the therapeutic work can do what we need it to do. And that's trust. What it actually takes to build with a young person who has every reason not to give it, and what it costs them to try. What it means for them and for us when they finally let us in. I'm Ashley Costello, and this is the Resilient Kid podcast. I'm going to tell you about a young person, and I'm going to call that young person Mia. Mia was 15 when she came to us, and I want to say that carefully, when she came to us, because the truth is that Mia had been coming to people for years. She just hadn't arrived yet, and you'll see what I mean by that. By the time she walked through our door, Mia had been seen by 4 different services in 3 years. School counsellor who left at the end of term and wasn't replaced, a CAMHS referral that resulted in an assessment, a waitlist, a discharge when she missed an appointment. Appointments that she missed because nobody made sure she had a way to get there. Voluntary sector worker who was brilliant with her for 6 months, but lost her funding and had to close a caseload. A social worker, well-meaning, stretched beyond any human being should be stretched, who changed 3 times in 18 months. 4 services, 3 years, not one consistent face. What do you think that does to a young person? And I want you to really sit with that question, because it doesn't just leave them without support. It teaches them something. It teaches them that when adults come and they go, that the moment you start to trust someone, to let them see a little bit of you, a little bit of what's actually going on, they leave, or they get replaced, or the funding runs out, or the service changes. So by the time Mia arrived with us, she'd learned, not consciously, but in her bones, that the sensible thing to do was not to bother, not to invest, to give enough to satisfy the referral, the tick boxes, to avoid follow-up concerns, but not actually to let anybody in, because letting people in had only ever led to one place: goodbye. Mia was polite. That's the first thing I noticed. Extremely carefully, deliberately polite. She answered questions, she made eye contact at the right moment, she said the right things about how she was doing. Not too good, because that would close the case, but not too bad, because that would escalate things and bring in people she didn't know and didn't want. Mia had become quite the expert in managing the adults around her. She knew exactly how much to give. She probably calibrated it over the 3 years, 4 services, to a precise, careful moment. Enough to keep things moving, not enough to risk anything real. I watched her do this in our first 3 sessions. I didn't try and break through because breaking through, that's my job. The job, especially with a young person who's learned that the walls are the only thing to keep them safe, is to sit alongside the wall. To sit alongside, back up against it, not to rattle, just to let them know quietly and without agenda, you're still here, whether they let you in or not. We met every week and I kept showing up. She kept being polite. I kept thinking somewhere underneath all that very careful management is a 15-year-old girl who's exhausted from holding it all together herself. And she'll tell me when she's ready. My job is to still be there when that happens. And then that one session, about 2 months in, 8 sessions, I suggested we go for a walk. Before I tell you about the walk, I want to give you the why, because what I was doing with Mia and the decision to take it outside, to put a hot chocolate in her hand and walk alongside rather than sit across, is backed by a growing and fascinating body of research. Let's start with what happens in the brain when a young person is in the state of guardedness. When we feel unsafe, and for Mia, a therapy room with a notepad, a chair, an adult asking questions, had become that cue for guardedness. Our nervous system activates the threat response, the fight, flight, freeze or fawn. Nothing dramatic, no full-on fight or flight, but a low-level alertness that keeps the part of the brain scanning for danger, scanning for the moment this person shows their true colours, scanning for the exit. And when part of the brain is doing that, it's not available for the kind of reflective, emotional honesty conversation that therapy asks of us. Therapy is a brave thing to do. And I will tell most of my clients, it is a blessing and a curse because it really helps. But also, once you have seen, you can't unsee. You cannot access vulnerability when your nervous system thinks you might need to protect yourself. And this is what researcher Porges describes in his polyvagal theory. I mentioned it last week in our mental health, and I've probably mentioned him before. The idea that our nervous system is constantly reading cues for safety and danger in our environment, and that the state we're in physiologically determines what we're capable of emotionally. You can't think your way into feeling safe. Safety has to be felt in the body before anything else. So here's where the walk comes in. Research on what we sometimes call walk and talk therapy, and shout out to a friend of mine who is just amazing. She actually has started taking business owners on a walk to network. And the reason being is this. The more broadly therapeutic of nature and movement shows something really compelling when we walk alongside someone rather than sitting across from them. Several things happen simultaneously. The face-to-face element, for which a guarded young person can feel like they're being watched, being assessed, being read, is removed. Side by side is fundamentally different relational position, and it is the position of accompaniment, not examination. If you are at home and you want to have a chat with your kids, play Lego, get colouring out. If it's a teen, get them in the car, take them for a drive. It's amazing the difference it makes. Now, back to our story. The movement itself, the act of walking, regulates the nervous system. It activates a bilateral simulation of the body, left, which is shown to reduce emotional arousal and increase the access to reflective thinking. It's not an accident when people say they can think more clearly when they walk. And being outside, away from the room, the chair, the box of tissues, or the furniture of therapy or school, disrupts that cue. The young person's brain, which has learnt to perform in that setting, doesn't quite know what mode to be in. And in that gap, sometimes something real slips through. Now, I want to bring in Brené Brown here because her work on trust, I think, is amazing. It's some of the most important and practically useful research we have when it comes to understanding what was happening with Mia and what has to happen before any young person will let us in. Brown spent years researching trust, what it is, how it's built, and crucially, why it's hard to rebuild once it's been broken. And what she found challenges the way most of us think about it. We tend to think of trust as a big thing, a grand gesture, a single defining moment where someone proves themselves. But Brené Brown's research tells us something different. She says trust is built in the smallest of movements, not the dramatic ones, the quiet ones. And she created a framework, the Braving Inventory, that breaks down trust into 7 specific elements. And I want to share them with you because when I look at this list, I see exactly what Mia needed. And I hope that the story of Mia will help you see it too. And exactly what so many young people who have passed from service to service have never consistently received. So B is boundaries. Do you respect my boundaries? Do you say no when you need to? Do you honour mine? It's really important to stick to boundaries with young people because it helps them feel safe. R is for reliability. Do you do what you're going to do? When you say you're going to do something, do you follow through? Not once, but consistently over time. I give my appointments to the kids and teens. They know when it is. I try and keep the same time. And if I have to move it, I tell them in advance. But do you know what I do? I turn up every single session. A is for accountability. When you make a mistake, do you own it? Do you apologise and make it right without making your mistake my problem to manage? The V is for vault. Do you keep what I share confidential? Do you treat my story as mine, not something to be shared or discussed or used? The I is for integrity. Do you choose courage over comfort? Do you practice your values rather than just professing them? This is that walking the talk. N is for non-judgment. Can I ask for what I need and tell you how I feel without being judged for it? This is paramount for young people. And G, that's for generosity. Do you extend the most generous interpretation to my intentions, my words, and my actions? Because we know teens are given a hard rap. We know that often they will be misinterpreted. People like to think the worst. Can we extend to them the benefit of the doubt? Braving, boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. Now, you will see at the end of this, I always do a caveat. This Mia is a composite of various different clients. Some of the themes often run the same with clients, and that's how I can do composite case studies like this and tell you about them. So just so you know, the V for vault is real. We do keep that confidentiality, even when we're talking to their parents. So let's think about Mia. Think about what 3 years, 4 services, countless faces are taught her about each of those 7 things. Boundaries, blurred by professionals who came and went without warning. Reliability, broken again and again by funding cuts, staff changes, missed appointments, and letters. Accountability, rarely modelled by the systems that discharged her without explanation. How can we hold our young people to account or ask them to hold themselves to account when their systems around them let them down all the time? What's the point? Vault, uncertain because she never knew who she was talking to and who else they were talking to. Now, for us, when we come in as coaches for our young people, we will say to them, we will only share this if we have your explicit permission. We might recommend if your teacher knew this, if your dad knew this, that might help, but we won't share it without permission. Integrity. Hard to see when the people meant to help her kept disappearing. Non-judgment. Impossible to trust when you've been a case number more than a person. Generosity. The hardest of all to believe in when experience has taught you that adults have limits. Every single element of Brown's trust framework has been, for Mia, repeatedly and consistently undermined, not by bad people, but by a broken system. But the damage to her capacity to trust was the same. And this is what we were rebuilding on that walk. Not dramatically, not all at once, but one element at a time. Hot chocolate in hand, big coats on, wrapped up against the cold. Starting with reliability. I am here, same time, same face, same commitment. I'm working from there. Brown says something else that I carry with me always. She says, trust is the product of vulnerability that grows over time, requires work, attention, and full engagement. You cannot rush it. You cannot manufacture it, and you can only create the conditions for it when you show up every single week, until the young person in front of you decides that this time, just maybe, it might be safe to try. I want to just move to some work that I looked at when I very first did my psychology degree, and I was looking at working with young people, and that's Mary Ainsworth. Foundational work in attachment. She tells us that secure attachment, the experience of having a safe base, is built through repeated experiences of a caregiver or trusted adult being present, responsive, and consistent. For young people like Mia, whose experience of adults has been anything but consistent, the therapeutic relationship has to be reparative attachment work. It has to become, over time, the safe base that was never reliably there before. And safe bases are not built in 60-minute weekly sessions. They're built in accumulation of small moments. The same face, week after week, remembered details, the walk on a grey morning, hot chocolate going cold in a paper cup. Consistency is the language of safety, and safety is the door to getting it. So, how do we build trust with a young person who has every reason not to? I'm going to give you 5 things I've learned, sometimes the hard way, because let me tell you, I often learn just as much from the young people as they do from me. I'm going to tell you about what it actually takes to earn the trust of that young person who's been let down by the systems that were supposed to help them. So, 1, don't take the wall personally. It's not about you. And anybody who works with me, I will often say that it's not about you. I'm going to get t-shirts printed. It was built before you arrived by experiences and a system that had nothing to do with you. Your job is not to knock through that wall. Your job is to be consistent, boringly safe. That young person eventually decides on their terms, not ours, in their time, not our time frame, that they don't need it quite so high around you, that you might be that safe person. We often talk about it takes roughly 12 sessions to make a change. If you have got a young person who has been consistently let down, you might as well double that. When I talk about Mia, I said it took 8 sessions, 2 months, before I got that wall down. Does that mean we didn't do any work beforehand? No. But what it meant is that she finally let me in and we could really do some work. 2, match your energy to theirs, not your agenda. If a young person comes in flat, don't be all like performance energy trying to lift them up. Sit flat with them. If they're closed, don't push for the open. Meet them where they're at. That phrase is everything. Let them feel that whatever they are in this moment is acceptable and that there's no wrong way to show up here. That builds trust. 3, do things side by side if you can, not face to face. A walk makes all the difference. But make something, look at something. The face-to-face dynamic of traditional therapy can often feel like a spotlight for a young person who is used to being assessed. Side by side says, I'm not watching you, I am with you, and there is a difference. I remember having a young client, and my very next client, and I'm sure I've said this on the podcast before, my very next client was a 17-year-old, and I purposely left the colouring out. Got new sheets, and I started colouring as my 17-year-old walked in. And they said, oh, what are you doing? I said, oh, I've just got some new crayons. It was left over from the little person before you. I said, have you seen this gold pencil? It's just lovely. Can I have a go? Of course you can. That was one of the best sessions ever because they weren't face to face. We were colouring, sometimes in silence, sometimes they didn't stop talking, but they didn't stop colouring in the lines. 4, name the pattern without the blame. For a young person who has been passed from service to first, name it carefully and when the time is right, not with blame, something like, I know you've been here before, with other people and I know they didn't stay. I want you to know I know that and I'm not going anywhere. Don't make a big moment of it. You are not the hero. This is not about you. Just say it and then prove it week after week by showing up, by being there. 5, let small moments be enough. Not every session will feel significant. Some will feel like nothing happened. Trust the accumulation. Trust that you showing up, being consistent, remembering the small things, that it's doing something even when it doesn't like it. The walk with the hot chocolate looks like nothing, but it was everything. The moment's changed. The story. Let's get back to the story and the walk. So, it was Monday morning, grey sky, particularly if you're here in the UK, that British grey that isn't quite rain, isn't quite not. Mia had come in, sat down, and I could feel in the room that we were in one of those sessions where nothing is going to happen in the conventional sense. She was somewhere else, present in body, but maybe not in mind. Instead of pushing through, instead of trying to create that moment, I said, do you want to get out of here for a bit? We could go for a walk. I'll get us a hot chocolate and we can just walk. She looked at me like I suggested something slightly suspicious. Are we allowed? This is your session. We can do whatever works. She thought about it and then said yes. So we walked. We didn't have an agenda. I didn't have a question I was building towards. We talked about nothing, about the town, a shop that closed down, about a coffee place on the corner, was it any good, TV show, normal, ordinary, 2 people walking. Then, about 15 minutes in, hot chocolate in both hands and her eyes on the pavement in front, Mia said, the last person I saw before you, she was really good. I was just starting to. And she stopped. She looked at me, checked something. She had to stop because the money ran out. She sent me a letter. I didn't reply because what's the point? I didn't feel the silence. I just walked. After a moment, she said, does that happen here? The money running out. And I said, honestly, I can't promise you nothing will ever change. What I can promise you is that anything changes, you'll be the first to know, and we'll figure it out together. And I won't send a letter. She nodded, kept walking, very quietly said, okay. One word, but I knew what it meant. It meant I'm going to try. I'm going to risk it one more time. I'm going to let you in a little bit. Not all the way, not yet, but a little bit. And I want to tell you that I kept that promise, that Mia stayed with us, that the 360 held. Her mum came in, we spoke to school slowly, carefully. The adults in her life started to communicate in a way they hadn't done before. And Mia, who had spent 3 years giving just enough to keep things moving, started for the first time to give something real. Not because we had the best techniques, not because I was saying the perfect thing every time, but because we got her hot chocolate, we walked alongside her, and when asked the most important question she'd ever asked, we told her the truth. And we stayed. Mia's story is not unusual. I want to say that very clearly because it matters. The experience of being passed from service to service, of investing in a relationship, only to have it extended by funding cuts, staff changes, waiting lists. This is not unusual with the young people that we work with. For many, it's the norm, and it's usually because parents are beside themselves and they've got nowhere else to turn. Research by Children's Commissioner for England has found that a significant proportion of young people referred to mental health services experience at least one break in provision before reaching stable support. I would estimate that is a much higher number. Each break is not just an inconvenience for these young people. Each break is a lesson. The lesson is don't bother trusting. The funding landscape for children and young people's mental health in the UK remains deeply challenging. CAMHS waiting lists in some areas stretch to 18 months. I have had people in front of me who have said that when they have gone to CAMHS, unless they had seriously hurt themselves, then they wouldn't be able to have a place with the CAMHS team. Voluntary sector services, often the most flexible, most relational, most able to do the kind of walking and talking that reaches young people like me, are chronically underfunded, and they're the first to face cuts when budgets tighten. The cost to this is not abstract. It's measured in young people who learn before they're old enough to vote, and the systems designed to help them are not reliable. The help comes and goes, and the sensible thing is not to need it. At the Resilient Kid, the 360, where we wrap the child or the teen 360, is partly a clinical decision on my behalf and partly a moral one. When we wrap that young person, whether it's in the therapy room, family, school, all of it together, we are saying we are not a service that passes you on. We are a relationship that holds you, and relationships, unlike referral pathways, do not have a discharge criteria. The moment Mia asked, does the money run out here? That was not a practical question. It was a vulnerable one. It was, are you going to leave me too? Every young person we work with is asking that same question. Some of them ask out loud, most of them in a way they sit, the way they answer, the way they hold the hot chocolate, with both hands, and maybe look at the pavement. Our job is to hear it every single time. Now, just caveat, we don't bring hot chocolate every single time, but we do, and often. I've been thinking about how to close, what to say at the end of this episode, and I keep coming back to the same thing. Trust is not given, it's earned, slowly, quietly, in the accumulation of ordinary moments. A walk, a hot chocolate, a consistent face at a consistent time in a world that has been anything but consistent. A promise made carefully and kept faithfully. You think about a jar of marbles. Every time we show up, every time we remember a name, we are putting a marble in somebody's trust jar. For young people who's been failed by systems, who've been processed and referred and discharged and passed on, the act of trusting again is profound courage. We should never, ever take it lightly when we work with young people. We should never mistake it for a given. Every single time a young person decides to let us in, they are doing something brave, something that's cost them before. something they're choosing to try again despite everything. That deserves our very best, our most honest, our most consistent, and our most human side. Not our most clinical or perfectly boundaried, but our most human element. Go for the walk. Get the hot chocolate. Sit alongside rather than across. Remember the small things. If you're a teacher, bring a snack. If you're a parent, get out in the fresh air. Stay when it gets hard. Listen and listen again. Repair when you get it wrong, and when they ask, in whatever way they ask, are you going to leave me too? Tell them the truth and then prove it. Because that's the job. That's the job that we have. And it is the most important job there is. Thank you so much for being here for this one. This episode sits very close to my heart, and I hope it's given you something useful. Whether you're a professional, a parent, or someone who has been that young person with the wall up and the hot chocolate in both hands. Thank you. If you work with young people and this resonated, please share it with your team. If you'd like to find out more about the way we work at The Resilient Kid, how we wrap them 360 and we meet them where they're at, the school liaison, the family work, everything is in the show notes and at our website. We'd love to welcome new coaches because we are desperately needed. Until next time, keep showing up, keep staying safe. It matters more than you know.